I had a guest on a year ago, and he worked in counterintelligence in the CIA, and he said it's impossible for any of the intelligence to be good if you don't know who's coming in the country. We have zero idea what we're supposed to, and it's like, I guess he was kind of explaining that. That sounds really terrifying, to be honest.
That's horrible. That's why I wanted, first of all, Jay, I have to compliment you because nobody's ever asked me that question before. Okay. And it's such a clear and present question, right? But nobody's ever asked it before, and it really demonstrates exactly what you're saying, how vulnerable we are. Why is the National Counterintelligence Center, NCIC, sending out a warning every 6 months to Americans saying, hey, you can't trust everything you read on social media, and hey, watch out for these scam phone calls and these fake messages that are going to come in and they're trying to steal your identity and steal your money. And why does the FBI have to put out warnings about the vulnerabilities of Android systems? Why do they do this? Because they know that they have no other way of protecting Americans. Because the top talent don't want to work in those offices. And even if they did work in those offices, there's only funding for 1 or 2 people.
So any myth that, America is a surveillance state where every keystroke is recorded and shared among intelligence, and facial recognition cameras are close to operating from satellites. Where are we at, Andrew? Is that any reality there, or far, far from it?
We are far from anything like that. Do we have the technology that could make it possible? Yes. Mm-hmm. But we don't have the political will. We don't have the security tolerance to let it actually happen.
Which is kind of good, right?
Well, some people would say that. I would actually argue the opposite.
Okay.
I would say that if America really wants to prepare itself to be safe in the future, we need to be a lot more willing to be a heavily policed state. Because right now, our adversaries can operate in the permissive environment that is our backyard. Your neighbor could be a fake, deep cover Chinese operative, a terrorist who's claiming asylum just to get into the country, who's actually a sleeper that's going to wake up in 2 years and blow up some building in Wichita, Kansas, or New York City. Like, we are so at risk because we're so afraid of the secrets that we keep, right? The fact that some, Billy Bob nobody is still texting his ex-girlfriend from high school, even though he's been married for 4 years. He's so invested in his personal privacy because he thinks that the American federal government cares that he's considering an affair against his wife.
Right.
When nobody cares.
Nobody
cares.
Want
you want to cheat the IRS out of $1,000 in taxes? Even they don't care, right? Like, there's so many things that you can do in the United States that the government, that nobody sees as a national security threat. But in order to protect your secrets, you are willing to let foreigners come into our country nefariously, abuse our system, kidnap our children, create sex slaves, right? Like run anything from fentanyl to drugs and other weapons. Like, we're willing to let our national security be threatened in order for us to protect our own personal privacy. That's not going to keep us ahead of the curve in the future.
No, it's such a tough one for people to get their minds around, though, because, if America was a corporation, the brand message is freedom, right? And I often debate this with my in-laws. I love just ribbing them because my in-laws are very, very proud Americans. And we'll probably end up down there. I want to talk to you about this, actually, because my wife's American, I'm Canadian, my kids are dual. We'll probably end up back in the U.S. inside of the next 5 years. We're simultaneously putting roots down in Indonesia. We spent about 6 months a year there just for some optionality and, unclear where we may land, keeping our options open. But, I bug my in-laws and I say, the whole concept of American freedom is just a branding campaign. America leads the world in incarcerated citizens per capita. This is the country where you're most likely to end up in a cage, therefore. That can't exist. Simultaneously, the value of freedom, those can't coexist. But, we show you a picture of a bald eagle and a Bud Light and you forget, right? America's free, right? It's just that, right? But that is the brand and that is the identity. And so the argument that although you may reminisce about 1950s America and what we used to be, we're not that anymore. And so gravitating towards a police state, surveillance state, may actually protect the freedoms that we have in a counterintuitive way. Yeah?
You're totally right. And I think what you're getting at there, aside from the fact that you're razzing your in-laws, which I personally appreciate because I razz my in-laws too. But what you're getting at there is getting back to our original question of America has to decide what it's going to be. 1950s America wasn't free, right? Mm-hmm. Women weren't free. Children weren't free. African Americans weren't free, right? Blacks weren't free. Like, we were just a different type of oppressive culture. Even today, we are still a different type of oppressive culture, because today, like at the very least, if you just look at wages, right? Slavery is very real in the United States if you look at it through a lens of wages. There are plenty of people who can't earn enough to actually be able to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of freedom and happiness. Sure. They can't do it. And it's because of the constant kind of shifting morality around capitalism. There's some people who want to treat capitalism like it's oppressive. There's other people who want to treat capitalism like it's opportunistic. Mm-hmm. There's a third group that want to treat capitalism like it's a responsibility. So we don't even know how we want to handle our own free market. Do we abuse people? Do we trick people? Do we lie to people? Do we empower people? We don't know, because we haven't decided what kind of country we want to be yet, because we're 13 years old, still wearing sweatpants, getting our first boners in math class. It's an awkward phase of our country. We are a far cry from where we started. And let's not beat around the bush. The United States started with white landowning men, and those were the only people who were allowed to vote. So we're far beyond where we were then. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're closer to where we need to be for success. We still have to figure out what's the right balance. Personally, I think it's ridiculous that we let every 18-year-old qualify for voting. What the does an 18-year-old know about picking the future leaders of our country? What investment do they have in our country? Hell, most of the 18-year-olds I know right now don't want a house, don't want a car, don't want to pay taxes, and most of them want to be digital nomads that live in some foreign country. So why would we give them the same quality of vote as a 45-year-old mother or father with 3 children who's been in a career for 22 years, who pays their taxes every year and is trying to develop a life in the United States? It's ridiculous that we treat those two people as equals through the eyes of our electoral process, but we do, right? And that's part of what we have to do, is define what is freedom to the United States. Is it the freedom to pursue opportunity? Is it the freedom as is dictated by saying everybody is equal? Is it the freedom to come and go? Is it the freedom to create a new business? What is freedom in our definition?
Yeah, that's interesting. And you painted the picture of sort of the lower income bracket who would be trapped by the non-discretionary expenses and the ceiling on their income. And you could say, oh, but they're still free to do whatever they want. And there's a story that we could tell that you nod your head and be like, yeah, no, for sure. But mathematically, what's the difference between that and serfdom?
Right.
Like mathematically, right? It's effectively the same situation. There's no escape. Again,
this is one of those things that's, if you get out of the United States, you'll see this around the world, right? Pakistanis and Indians are free to leave their country to pursue higher paying jobs in the Middle East. But once they get to those higher paying jobs, what nobody realizes is they can barely afford to live in the Middle East where they're making this high income job, because the cost of living in UAE or in the Emirates is so high that they don't even have excess income to send back to their home. So when they scrounge an extra 2 or 3% savings for the month and they send it back to India, it makes a big impact on their family back in India, but it essentially locks those people into slavery in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And that's how Middle Eastern employees treat them. Because Middle Eastern employers understand there's always another Pakistani to take your job. So I don't have to pay you more, because if I fire you today, there's going to be 3 more Pakistanis who take the job tomorrow at the same low rate or a lower rate. So this cycle of abuse and serfdom, to use your word, just propagates all over the world.
Okay, so my kids are young. They're 4, 6, and 8. And my wife and I often talk about the advantages we had growing up in countries that were surrounded by opportunity, predictable governance, relatively safe, clean streets, all this stuff. And we've been able to build an amazing life as a consequence of that environment. I'm not super convinced that Canada will provide that same environment over the next 30 years. I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. If managed properly, Canada is a simple country. It's like colossal with almost nobody in it, rich in resources. It's an export nation, right? If you do that right, it works. But if you vilify those industries, it's pretty tough. We're looking at the U.S. We're spending a lot of time in Indonesia, as mentioned, putting down roots, pros and cons. I mentioned I'm debating moving to the U.S. and you laughed, right? And so I want to dig into that. What are your thoughts on relocating young family to the U.S. today in order to capture that opportunity that America's delivered for the last 80 years?
So I think it's important that we frame this through a lens of time.
Okay.
And this is what many adults don't do. It's not about the opportunities today. What you're actually pursuing are the opportunities for your children when they become adults. So your oldest is 8. So you need to be asking yourself, what's the United States going to look like 10 years from now? Mm-hmm. Because that's when your 8-year-old becomes an 18-year-old, when they become a voting member of the American population, when they are qualified to go to college, or when they're able to work, or whatever else it might be. So what is it going to look like in 10 years? Not what does it look like today? Here's how I'm approaching the same question, because my oldest is 12, my youngest just turned 8.
Okay.
The United States that will exist 10 years from now is difficult to identify, because the United States is in this pendulum process right now, just like you said. So if that pendulum process propagates for 2 more presidencies, that's 8 years down the drain of drastic policy changes, drastic cultural changes, drastic infighting, if it continues for 2 more presidential cycles. If we find some sort of stability, we're going to find stability on an extreme. We're not going to find stability in some sort of centrist government. So it's either going to be 8 years of far left practices or 8 years of far right practices. Neither of those is going to give your children the kind of center rational thought process that they need to really thrive and succeed. All of this to say, I think the uncomfortable truth that all parents need to accept right now is that the opportunity for your children comes from you. It's not going to come from a government. It's not going to come from an industry. Again, 1950s America, your commitment to your company yielded results. Your company committed to you. 1980s, 1990s America, your commitment to your country lent to your country's commitment to you. So parents never had to carry the burden of opportunity for their children. All the parents had to do was say, get your ass in school, get good grades, go to college, and you'll be successful. That was the parental responsibility in the past. I tell this to everybody who will listen. If your net worth is $1 million or more, you are the best source of opportunity for your children. You need to shape how they view the world. You need to shape how they view opportunity. You need to teach them resilience. You need to teach them how to identify opportunities on their own, because you're fucking qualified to do it, because you built $1 million net worth yourself, whether that's in a company or as a principal of some other company or an entrepreneur or an investor. You know how to find opportunity and turn ideas into money. If you're worth that much money, you know how to do that. If your net worth is below $1 million, you don't know how to turn ideas into money. And your best opportunity, the best thing that you can do is either learn how to do that or accept that you will never know how to do that, and then try and line your children up to become cogs in the future world so that they can at least have the opportunity to learn how to do the thing you couldn't do. But we need to accept that. We need to accept that. You can have your feelings hurt. You can have your toes stomped on. You can have your face slapped, but that is the bottom fucking line. If you know how to turn ideas into money, you need to teach your children how to do that, because that will guarantee their freedom for the rest of their life. And that will be the legacy that carries on with your family name. But if you're a wage slave now, trading your time for money, and you don't know how to turn ideas into money, the best thing that you can do is just set your children up to have better opportunity than what you had, so that hopefully they can be the ones that break that cycle and change the legacy of your family name.
Oh man, dude, I love that. That's powerful. And, my wife and I chat about that often. Like, what's the success picture look like if we did a good job, 10, 15 years down the road? And where we landed is like, if we've instilled creativity, confidence, and persistence in our boys, then we've probably done okay, given that we have no idea what the economy might look like in 10 years. But a creative person will always find a place,
Yes.
They can solve problems, come up with it, but they need the confidence to actually put that creativity into the world, not just sit at home and sit on their idea, too timid to implement. And then persistence, obviously, because that first idea is going to suck, and the second idea might suck too, but eventually you might get it right if you're persistent, right?
And that's how you know that that right there, Jay, is how the whole world understands why you're successful.
CIA believes that all people are born with a spy secret superpower. For some people, that means they can win deals. For others, they can spot liars. Some can even seduce lovers. I built a free 3-minute test to help reveal to you exactly what your secret hidden superpower is. All you have to do is click on the link in the description below, take the test, and start using your spy superpower to stay ahead of 99% of people.
Because you can sit there and say the first idea will probably suck, and so might the second, and so might the third. How many people think every idea they have is a fucking great idea?
Right.
Like, trust me, I've had lots more bad ideas, lots more failed ideas than I've had successful ideas. And that's something that you only learn with trial and error. That's why it takes persistence. And that's why I have no doubts about your family. Your kids are going to be great. Your kids are going to have massive success. And here's the really sad underbelly of it all. If you just look at it empirically, the children who have parents who have resources now are going to become children who have resources that they can create on their own in the future. And that population is getting smaller and smaller because wealthy people have fewer children. And those fewer children are going to have fewer children still because they're going to keep having children later in life. They're going to continue to devote themselves to the responsibility of building resources before they build family. So the wealth gap in the United States will continue to get larger and larger and larger, which means that you will continue to have more and more population with less and less money. That is a guaranteed recipe for unrest. That's a guaranteed recipe for crime. That's a guaranteed recipe for instability. So if you really want to know why I hope my children choose to become global citizens first, rather than American citizens first, it's because the United States that is almost guaranteed to occur is going to be in America with a huge wealth gap that is going to contribute to more crime, more civil unrest, and more instability in the future. And my children could raise their families anywhere else in the world and have less of that instability than we have here in the United States. There's no good place, but at any given time, there's always a comparatively better place.